On the morning of March 15th, 1889, the staff at the Belmont Hotel in Newport, Rhode Island, made a discovery that would haunt the city for years. Room 237, reserved indefinitely for socialite. Isabella Fairmont was found empty. The silk curtain was still drawn, champagne glasses from a private gathering remained untouched, and a half-written, unsigned letter lay abandoned. Isabella, once the darling of presidents and princes, had vanished into the fog, leaving only a trace of French perfume and a mystery that authorities would struggle to solve for decades. Their investigation unearthed secrets so damaging that 3 prominent families paid to have the records sealed. Before we delve deeper into Isabella's disappearance, don't forget to hit subscribe and ring the bell, because stories like hers, the ones they tried to bury, are exactly what we uncover here. Leave a comment about where you're listening from, as Isabella's story may have darker connections beyond Rhode Island's opulent mansions. To understand the shockwaves of Isabella's disappearance, we must first look back. In 1881, Newport's summer mansions, some more expensive than entire towns, served as the backdrop for an elite new aristocracy of railroad barons, steel magnates, and shipping tycoons. Among them, Isabella Fairmont ruled supreme. Born Isabella Catherine Aldridge in 1859, she combined old Boston heritage with new money, making her irresistible to Newport's social scene. Her father's shipping magnate Cornelius Aldridge had made his fortune on the eastern seaboard, while her mother boasted roots in one of Massachusetts' founding families. This lineage, along with Isabella's striking beauty, raven black hair, piercing blue eyes, and figure that inspired French couture, ensured her position as Newport's social queen. Her 1878 marriage to Theodore Fairmont, heir to a steel fortune, was the event of the decade. Their Newport estate, Rosecliff Manor, featured 70 rooms, Italian marble, and gardens tended by a 20-person staff. Isabella's legendary summer parties attracted senators, European nobility, and business moguls, where deals worth millions were made over champagne. Local papers couldn't get enough of her running columns about her fashion charitable works and high-profile guests. She even funded the construction of Newport's first proper theater. But beneath her glittering life, darker currents began to stir. The same social machinery that elevated her could tear her down with rumors and gossip. In 1884, whispers began after Isabella was seen dining alone with Jonathan Pembroke, a charming young architect with a mysterious past. The season of shadows had begun, and the consequences would be far-reaching. Jonathan Pembroke's arrival in Newport was calculated with military precision. His previous work, a Gothic revival mansion for a Pittsburgh steel baron and a colonial estate in Virginia, showcased both artistic vision and skill. Yet it was his personal magnetism that set him apart. Tall and lean, with dark hair falling across his forehead and intense green eyes, Pembroke exuded a dangerous charm that the city's usual suitors lacked. Isabella first met him during a committee meeting for Trinity Church's expansion. What began as a professional consultation quickly turned personal, evolving into a reckless, intense affair. Pembroke's visits to Rosecliff Manor, under the guise of renovation consultation, soon became prolonged, with the two spending hours together in the gardens or secluded in her private study. The staff began to notice the subtle changes. Isabella's laughter sounded different, his visits grew frequent, and letters bearing his distinctive handwriting arrived. Theodore, absorbed in his steel empire, remained unaware, trusting in his wife's social expertise. By summer 1884, whispers of an affair had begun. Observers saw Isabella entering Pembroke's temporary studio and sharing intimate moments at the casino. Most damning, a maid witnessed a passionate embrace between them at a private dinner. As word spread, invitations to exclusive events grew sparse, and former friends distanced themselves. Isabella, seemingly unaware, continued her bold defiance of social norms, seeing Pembroke more openly. On October 12th, 1884, the scandal exploded in the New York Herald under the headline, "Newport's Fallen Angel." The article not only revealed the affair, but also alleged that Pembroke was a fortune hunter with substantial gambling debts and a history of relationships with wealthy women. The piece suggested Isabella had given him significant sums of money and even sold valuable art from the Fairmont collection. This revelation devastated Theodore. His wife's affair had turned into a financial betrayal. The confrontation came on October 13th in Rosecliffe's library. Isabella admitted the affair but claimed her feelings for Pembroke were genuine. When presented with bank records showing her financial transfers, she denied manipulation, insisting she gave money out of love. Theodore's response was swift and unforgiving, demanding she end all contact with Pembroke and return to Boston for rehabilitation. Isabella, however, declared that she loved Pembroke, rejected her marriage, and intended to divorce an unthinkable scandal. The heated argument lasted late into the night, and the following morning, Theodore appeared a broken man. Further investigation revealed that Isabella had transferred nearly $50,000 to Pembroke in just 4 months, equivalent to over $1 million today. The financial and emotional toll of her defiance was far more than social humiliation. Theodore's lawyers uncovered even more disturbing truths when they examined Isabella's claimed sales of artwork and jewelry. A diamond necklace that had once belonged to Theodore's mother was sold for a fraction of its appraised value, hinting at either poor judgment or intentional deceit. Worse still, private investigators uncovered troubling patterns in Pembroke's past. He had previously been involved with wealthy women in Pittsburgh and Richmond, receiving large sums before disappearing when their relationships were exposed. The report painted Pembroke as a smooth-talking con artist, preying on lonely rich women with precision. When Theodore presented these findings to Isabella, her reaction was not one of shock, but a surprising defense of Pembroke. She claimed that his past relationships were different and insisted their love was genuine. Theodore realized that Isabella had fallen victim to a manipulation so deep that she could no longer distinguish between reality and the fantasy Pembroke had spun for her. By November 1884, Isabella's position in Newport society was irrevocably damaged. The Herald article had spread across the country, turning a local scandal into a national spectacle. Theodore issued an ultimatum. Isabella must publicly denounce her affair with Pembroke, withdraw from society for a year, and accept strict financial and social restrictions. In return, Theodore promised not to seek a divorce and to help restore their reputation through charitable work and strategic social moves. Isabella's response was to disappear for 3 days. She was found in Providence, staying under an assumed name at a modest boarding house. When confronted, Isabella proposed a radical and dangerous plan. She threatened to expose a network of social corruption within Newport's elite. She claimed that Pembroke had shared secrets about his architectural commissions, revealing hidden rooms, secret passages, and concealed safes in several mansions. These modifications, she alleged, were used by clients to hide evidence of illegal activities like tax evasion and bribery. Isabella's accusations were explosive. She claimed to have proof that Senator William Blackstone had concealed bribery evidence, that railroad magnate Charles Pionton was hiding forged land acquisition documents, and that 3 prominent families had manipulated steel prices through illegal means. Theodore's lawyers were skeptical, but the sheer scale of her threat terrified them. Even if her claims were false, making them public could ruin the reputations of Newport's most powerful families. On November 20th, 1884, a tense meeting took place at the Belmont Hotel, attended by representatives from 5 influential Newport families. Isabella presented her demands, $100,000 in cash. Pembroke's debts settled and guaranteed safe passage to Europe for both of them, where they would disappear forever. The negotiation dragged on for 6 hours, and by midnight, a deal was struck, but with unexpected conditions. The families agreed to her financial terms, but insisted that Isabella and Pembroke travel separately, avoid contact for 2 years, and sign binding agreements never to return to the U.S. or communicate with anyone from Newport society. Isabella, though agreeing to the terms, appeared distracted and distant during the final negotiations, as if her mind was elsewhere. When asked if she understood the permanent nature of her exile, Isabella simply smiled and remarked that some sacrifices were worth making for love. On November 25, 1884, the money was delivered to her hotel room. She was scheduled to depart for Europe on December 2nd aboard the steamship Britannica. Pembroke had already left for England 3 days earlier on a different vessel. It seemed like the final chapter of the most expensive love story in American social history. But Isabella would never board the Britannica, and the mystery of her final 7 days would haunt Newport society for decades. Isabella's last week in America unfolded with meticulous planning, suggesting either careful preparation or mounting desperation. She checked out of her Providence boarding house and returned to Newport, booking a suite at the Belmont Hotel under her maiden name. This was symbolically significant, as she was reverting to her pre-marriage identity before the scandal and the chain of events leading to her exile. Hotel staff reported that she seemed remarkably calm during her stay, taking meals in her room, receiving no visitors, and spending most of her time writing letters. The hotel's desk clerk, William Chen, noted that she mailed at least a dozen letters, but he couldn't recall the addresses or recipients. On November 28th, Isabella made an unusual request. She asked the hotel concierge to arrange for a photographer to take a formal portrait. The photographer, Marcus Steinberg, described the session as one of the strangest of his career. Isabella posed for nearly 2 hours, insisting on several photographs with different poses and lighting. She paid in cash and requested that the plates be developed immediately, staying in the studio while the images were processed. Steinberg described her eyes as holding a fierce determination mixed with profound sadness. She kept adjusting a ruby brooch that had belonged to her grandmother. And when asked about scheduling another session after her return from Europe, she simply smiled and said it wouldn't be necessary. The photographs discovered decades later during the probate of Steinberg's estate showed Isabella in formal attire with a serene yet final expression. In several images, she appeared to be gazing past the camera as if seeing something beyond the studio. On December 1st, Isabella's behavior grew even more peculiar. She hired a carriage and spent the day visiting significant places around Newport, the Casino Trinity Church, and the Cliff Walk, where she had once strolled with dignitaries. The carriage driver, Thomas McGillicuddy, later reported that Isabella seemed to be saying goodbye to each location, spending long moments in silent reflection. That evening, Isabella returned to the Belmont Hotel and requested a late dinner. The night manager, Robert Sterling, personally delivered the meal and later reported that she appeared agitated, yet determined. She had changed into a deep blue silk evening gown, and her ruby brooch caught the lamplight as she moved. She thanked him for his service and gave him a tip that was unusually generous for the circumstances. When he protested, she simply said, "Generosity is one of the few privileges money provides, and I want to exercise it while I still can." The final confirmed sighting of Isabella Fairmont occurred at 11:30 p.m. on December 1st. Hotel clerk William Chen saw her descending the main staircase, dressed in a dark traveling coat and carrying a small leather valise. She walked with purpose but without haste, nodding politely to Chen as she crossed the lobby. When he asked if she needed help with transportation, she declined, saying her arrangements were already made. Chen watched her walk out into the December night, and that was the last anyone ever saw of her. A thick fog had rolled in from the harbor, swallowing Isabella's figure as she stepped into the mist, the last anyone would see of her alive. When she missed her scheduled departure on the Britannica the next morning, Theodore Fairmont contacted the police, triggering an investigation that would unravel a complex web of secrets, lies, and unanswered questions. The Newport Police Department, unaccustomed to such high-profile cases, struggled to make sense of Isabella's disappearance. Chief Detective Samuel Harrison, known for his methodical approach to crime, led the investigation, focusing initially on Isabella's last days in Newport. He interviewed hotel staff, carriage drivers, shopkeepers, and anyone who might have crossed her path. The picture that emerged was that of a woman who seemed to be closing chapters of her life, preparing for a departure she didn't expect to return from. The contents of her hotel room provided crucial clues. Her clothing and personal effects were neatly arranged, but what was missing was even more telling. Several pieces of valuable jewelry, including a diamond bracelet she had been seen wearing earlier in the week, were gone. Her personal papers included drafts of letters, possibly final messages, to family, but the completed versions were never found. The most puzzling clue was a partially burned document in the fireplace containing financial calculations and the names J.P., presumably Jonathan Pembroke, and W.B., which the investigators later linked to Senator William Blackstone. Harrison's investigation intensified when he attempted to contact Pembroke in London. The address provided by Isabella's lawyers turned out to be a mail forwarding service, and Pembroke himself had vanished. British authorities reported that no one matching his description had registered at any of London's hotels. This led Harrison to a chilling conclusion: Pembroke either used a false identity or never left at all. Further investigation revealed unsettling details about Pembroke. While his architectural credentials seemed legitimate, his past in Pittsburgh and Richmond raised suspicions. He had left both cities under questionable circumstances, abandoning projects and leaving unpaid debts. More disturbingly, Harrison's team uncovered hidden compartments and secret passages in several Newport mansions alterations that Isabella had mentioned. These modifications had been completed months before the affair became public, suggesting that Pembroke's relationship with Isabella may have been part of a larger plan. The investigation took a dramatic turn when an elderly seamstress, Mrs. Margaret Winthrop, came forward with vital information. She claimed to have witnessed a clandestine meeting between Isabella and two unknown men on the night of December 1st. While working late at the Peaton mansion, Mrs. Winthrop overheard a heated conversation between Isabella and the men with Isabella, gesturing emphatically while the men remained silent and watchful. This revelation would be the first hint that Isabella's disappearance was not merely a tragic accident, but part of a much darker, more calculated scheme. After about 20 minutes, one of the men handed Isabella what appeared to be a package or envelope. She then left with them in a closed carriage. Mrs. Winthrop's account was both compelling and problematic. She couldn't provide detailed descriptions of the two men, citing poor lighting and her limited vantage point. Moreover, her reputation in Newport was questionable, having been dismissed from previous positions for gossiping about her employer's private affairs. Detective Harrison was initially inclined to dismiss her testimony, until she provided a detail that only someone present could have known Isabella had been wearing the ruby brooch that hotel staff had noticed earlier, which had caught the moonlight in a distinctive way. Just when it seemed like the investigation couldn't become any more chilling, it did. If this story is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit the like button to support our content and subscribe to never miss stories like this. Together, let's discover what happened next in Isabella's final moments. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: financial records from the 5 Newport families who had negotiated Isabella's exile. Working with a federal investigator specializing in financial crimes, Harrison uncovered a series of transfers that painted a disturbing picture of the events leading up to Isabella's disappearance. The $100,000 set aside for her European exile had been transferred to a New York bank account under the name I.C. Aldrich, Isabella's maiden name. However, the account had never been accessed, and the money remained untouched, suggesting Isabella had never had the chance to claim it. Even more alarmingly, the account had been opened with forged documents, and the handwriting on the banking papers didn't match Isabella's distinctive script. This led Harrison to a chilling conclusion: someone had been impersonating Isabella during the final negotiations. Or the entire exile agreement was an elaborate deception designed to provide cover for something far more sinister. The investigation took an even darker turn when Harrison discovered that Jonathan Pembroke had not simply disappeared. He had been found dead in a Boston boarding house on November 30th, the day before Isabella's disappearance. The cause of death was officially listed as heart failure, but the boarding house keeper reported that Pembroke had been visited by 2 well-dressed gentlemen on the day he died. The men claimed to be business associates and spent several hours with Pembroke before quietly leaving. Though Pembroke's death had been reported in Boston newspapers, the news had not reached Newport until several days later. This timing suggested that Isabella might not have known about Pembroke's death when making her final arrangements on December 1st. If she had been planning to meet him or join him in exile, she may have been walking into a trap. Harrison's investigation now focused on identifying the 2 men who had visited Pembroke in Boston and who Mrs. Winthrop claimed to have seen with Isabella on the night she disappeared. The breakthrough came when Harrison learned that several of the Newport families had employed the same private security firm, the Pinkerton Detective Agency, to handle sensitive matters related to the Isabella scandal. Through legal pressure applied by federal investigators, Harrison obtained Pinkerton files that revealed the existence of a conspiracy to permanently silence Isabella. The files showed that the agency had been tracking both Isabella and Pembroke for weeks, documenting their movements and monitoring their communications. Most damning were strategic recommendations in the reports, suggesting that the scandal posed such a significant threat to their clients' interests that a permanent resolution might be necessary. The chilling implication was that Isabella's disappearance wasn't the result of a single betrayal, but part of a carefully orchestrated plan to ensure that she could never expose the dark truths she had uncovered. The euphemistic language in the Pinkerton reports was chilling in its implications. Phrases like neutralizing the threat and ensuring permanent discretion suggested that the agency had moved beyond surveillance into far darker territory. One report dated November 28th recommended immediate action to prevent the exposure of client interests and noted that Isabella's emotional instability provided the perfect cover for various outcomes. However, the most shocking discovery came when Detective Harrison examined the original architectural plans for the hidden compartments that Jonathan Pembroke had built in several Newport mansions. These plans included detailed specifications for a sophisticated hiding place beneath the wine cellar of the Peaton Mansion, a space large enough to conceal far more than just documents or valuables. Working with federal investigators and local building inspectors, Harrison obtained a warrant to search the Peaton Mansion. What they found on February 14, 1890, would haunt everyone involved in the investigation for the rest of their lives. The search began at dawn on Valentine's Day. Harrison had assembled a team that included federal investigators, local police officers, and a building inspector who specialized in structural modifications. The mansion's current resident, Charles Peaton, had left for New York immediately after the warrant was issued, leaving behind a house that seemed frozen in time. The elegant rooms were a testament to the wealth and privilege of Gilded Age Newport. At first, the wine cellar appeared normal. Racks of imported wines lined the walls, and the stone floor showed no signs of disturbance. But the building inspector's measurements revealed a discrepancy. The cellar's dimensions didn't match the architectural plans on file. There was approximately 8 feet of unaccounted space behind the north wall. Working carefully with picks and crowbars, the team broke through what appeared to be a false wall, made from the same stone as the cellar's original construction. Behind the false wall lay a hidden chamber, about 10 feet square and 8 feet high, with walls lined in lead sheeting, likely to prevent sound from escaping to the rooms above. The chamber was not empty. Isabella Fairmont's remains were found in the far corner, wrapped in what had once been an expensive silk evening cloak. The ruby brooch, which had been noticed by hotel staff and photographer Marcus Steinberg, was still pinned to the fabric, though the silk had deteriorated significantly over the 2 months she had been missing. The coroner's examination revealed that Isabella had died from chloral hydrate poisoning, a method increasingly favored by professional killers because it was difficult to detect and could be administered without the victim's knowledge. Traces of champagne were found in a crystal glass near her body, suggesting that the poison had been mixed with the drink. But what was perhaps most chilling was the evidence that Isabella had not died immediately. Scratch marks on the lead-lined walls indicated that she had been conscious when placed in the chamber and had attempted to escape before the poison took full effect. A partially written note was found clutched in her hand. It appeared to be accusations against her killers, but the paper had deteriorated too much for the text to be legible. The discovery of Isabella's body transformed the investigation from a missing persons case into a complex murder inquiry, with evidence pointing to a conspiracy at the highest levels of Newport society. Families with names synonymous with American industrial power were implicated. Detective Harrison's reconstruction of the events painted a horrifying picture of premeditated murder, disguised as a scandal management effort. The exile agreement had been nothing more than a cover for her disappearance. The 2 men who had met with Isabella on the night of December 1st were revealed to be Pinkerton agents, hired by the Newport families, who feared exposure of their business crimes. Isabella had been lured to the Piton mansion with the promise of final arrangements for her departure to Europe, only to be trapped in a hidden chamber, poisoned, and left to die. The scale of the conspiracy was staggering, and the chilling details painted a portrait of a ruthless effort to silence a woman who had stumbled too close to the truth. Instead of exile, Isabella had been drugged, imprisoned in the hidden chamber, and left to die. The lid lining, initially believed to be installed to protect valuable documents, was actually designed to create a soundproof execution chamber. As the investigation deepened, it was discovered that Jonathan Pembroke's death had also been a murder disguised as natural causes. Pembroke had been killed because of his knowledge of the hidden compartments and their contents, knowledge that would have made him a dangerous witness if Isabella's allegations were ever investigated. His death had been carefully timed to precede Isabella's by 1 day, ensuring she would have no chance to learn of his fate before walking into the trap set for her. The arrests that followed Isabella's discovery sent shockwaves through American high society. Charles Peaton, William Blackstone, and 3 other prominent Newport residents were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, while 2 Pinkerton agents were charged with actual murder and concealment of evidence. But the legal proceedings that many expected would expose the full scope of the conspiracy never materialized. Within weeks of the arrests, a series of mysterious developments began to undermine the prosecution's case. Key witnesses, including Mrs. Margaret Winthrop, recanted their testimonies or claimed they had been mistaken in their observations. Evidence mysteriously disappeared from police custody under suspicious circumstances, suggesting official corruption. Most significantly, the Pinkerton Detective Agency's files related to the case were destroyed in a suspicious fire that consumed their Boston offices. The federal investigation, which had initially been thorough, began encountering bureaucratic obstacles designed to slow progress indefinitely. Jurisdictional disputes between local, state, and federal authorities arose, and key investigators were reassigned to other cases. Legal challenges to search warrants and arrest procedures consumed months of court time. By the summer of 1890, it was clear that forces far more powerful than the Newport Police Department were working to prevent the full truth of Isabella's murder from being revealed. The wealthy families involved had resources that reached into every level of government and law enforcement, and they were prepared to use those resources to protect themselves. The final blow to the investigation came when Theodore Fairmont, Isabella's widowed husband, announced that he would no longer cooperate with the murder inquiry. In a statement released through his lawyers, Theodore declared that he had suffered enough tragedy and wished to allow his wife to rest in peace without further sensationalism. However, behind this public statement was a private agreement pieced together later through financial records. Theodore had been offered substantial compensation for his steel company's government contracts, along with guarantees of social rehabilitation and financial security. In exchange, he agreed to cease all cooperation with the murder investigation and to publicly support the theory that Isabella had died by suicide, despondent over her exile. The criminal cases against the Newport conspirators collapsed in the fall of 1890. Charles Peyton was acquitted due to insufficient evidence, and William Blackstone's case was dismissed on procedural grounds. The Pinkerton agents disappeared, presumed to have been relocated with new identities and financial compensation for their silence. Isabella Fairmont was officially buried in the family plot at Newport's Island Cemetery on October 15, 1890. The funeral was a private affair, attended by fewer than 20 people. No society columnist covered the service, and no newspaper ran obituaries about her life or achievements. Yet the story of Isabella's murder did not end with her burial or the collapse of the criminal cases against her killers. Over the years, a different kind of justice began to unfold, revealing that the dead woman's accusations had been entirely accurate. The families who had orchestrated Isabella's murder believed they had buried their secrets with her. But the corruption and criminal activities she had threatened to expose ultimately became the seeds of their own destruction. Charles Peyton, the man in whose basement Isabella had died, never recovered from the psychological trauma of her murder. Friends and family reported that he became increasingly paranoid and reclusive, convinced that Isabella's ghost haunted his mansion. Seeking peace, he moved permanently to his New York residence, but found no solace there either. His business empire, built on fraudulent government contracts that Isabella had discovered, began to unravel when federal investigators working independently of the Newport murder case uncovered evidence of systematic bid rigging and price manipulation. By 1895, Peyton's Steel Company was facing bankruptcy and federal prosecution for fraud. The hidden documents that Isabella had threatened to expose were eventually discovered during asset seizure proceedings, confirming every allegation she had made. Peyton himself died in 1897, found dead in his New York mansion under circumstances suggesting suicide, though the official cause of death was listed as heart failure. Senator William Blackstone's political career suffered a similarly dramatic collapse. In 1892, a corruption investigation unrelated to Isabella's murder uncovered the bribery evidence she had claimed was hidden behind his library fireplace. The documents discovered during a federal raid revealed a scheme to sell Senate votes on railroad legislation. Blackstone was expelled from the Senate in disgrace and died in poverty in 1899. His family fortune consumed by legal fees and restitution payments. The same pattern repeated for each of the families involved in Isabella's murder. Railroad magnate Thomas Hartwell was ruined when the Interstate Commerce Commission discovered the price-fixing conspiracy Isabella had threatened to expose. His suicide in 1896 made front-page news across the country. Banking heir Robert Sterling lost his fortune in the panic of 1893, largely due to his illegal lending practices, which had left his institution vulnerable when the economy collapsed. Perhaps the most poetic justice, however, came in the fate of the Pinkerton Detective Agency, the organization that had carried out Isabella's murder. The agency found itself under increasing federal scrutiny as labor violence escalated throughout the 1890s. Congressional investigations revealed a pattern of corruption, illegal surveillance, and violence, which ultimately destroyed the agency's reputation. By 1900, the Pinkerton Agency had lost most of its major clients and was facing criminal charges in multiple states. Detective Samuel Harrison, who had led the original investigation into Isabella's disappearance, never forgot the case that had defined his career. After retiring from the Newport Police Department in 1905, he spent his remaining years compiling a detailed record of everything he had uncovered about the conspiracy. His private files, discovered after his death in 1918, contained evidence linking several other mysterious deaths in Newport during the 1880s and 1890s to the same network of wealthy families and corrupt officials. Harrison's final report, written in 1917, concluded with a chilling assessment. Isabella Fairmont's murder was not an isolated crime, but part of a systematic campaign by America's wealthiest families to eliminate threats to their power through violence and intimidation. The failure to prosecute her killers sent a message that money and influence could place individuals above the law, a precedent that continues to corrupt the justice system today. The Isabella Fairmont case became a whispered cautionary tale in Newport society for decades. Parents warned their daughters about the dangers of social climbing and extramarital affairs, but they missed the deeper lesson that America's Gilded Age elite were capable of murder when their interests were threatened. The mansion where Isabella died, the Peaton Estate, stood empty for over 20 years after Charles Peaton's death. Local residents reported strange occurrences, lights appearing in the windows of the supposedly vacant house, music and laughter carrying across the grounds during winter evenings, and the persistent scent of French perfume in rooms that had been sealed for decades. In 1920, the mansion was purchased by a Catholic charity and converted into an orphanage, but the building's troubled history continued. Children reported seeing the figure of an elegantly dressed woman walking through the corridors at night, and several staff members claimed to have heard scratching sounds coming from the basement walls. The orphanage closed in 1935 after a series of mysterious accidents that the church deemed incompatible with the spiritual welfare of the children. The building was demolished in 1938, but construction workers reported finding additional hidden chambers that had not been discovered during the original police investigation. One chamber contained what appeared to be personal effects belonging to other missing persons from the 1880s and 1890s, suggesting that Isabella was not the only victim of Newport's elite conspiracy. The ruby brooch that Isabella had worn to her death became the subject of its own dark legend. After being held as evidence for several years, it was eventually returned to Theodore Fairmont, who donated it to a Boston museum. In 1895, the brooch disappeared from the museum's collection under suspicious circumstances that suggested theft. Yet it surfaced periodically over the following decades, always associated with tragedy. In 1902, it was found among the possessions of a New York socialite who had died in what appeared to be a suicide. In 1918, it reappeared in the jewelry box of a Philadelphia heiress who died under mysterious circumstances during the influenza pandemic. Each time the brooch was found, its owner met a fate eerily similar to Isabella's tragic end. Theodore Fairmont never remarried. He lived quietly in Boston until his death in 1923, dedicating his final years to philanthropic work aimed at protecting women from domestic violence. His will included a substantial endowment for a foundation dedicated to investigating unsolved crimes against women, although he never publicly acknowledged the connection to his first wife's murder. The Fairmont Foundation, established after Theodore's death, quietly funded investigations into dozens of suspicious deaths involving wealthy families throughout New England. While the foundation never solved any cases as dramatic as Isabella's, it played a significant role in bringing attention to a pattern of violence against women that had been systematically ignored by law enforcement, more concerned with protecting the powerful than seeking justice for the vulnerable. Perhaps the most enduring mystery surrounding Isabella's death was not who killed her or why, but what happened to the evidence she had gathered about the Newport conspiracy. Despite extensive searches of her hotel room personal effects and every location she had visited during her final week in Newport, investigators never found the documentation that she had claimed to possess. Detective Samuel Harrison believed that Isabella had hidden the evidence somewhere in Newport before her final meeting with the Pinkerton agents. He suspected she had foreseen the danger she faced and had taken steps to ensure her allegations would survive her death. Harrison spent years searching for this hidden cache of documents, but died without ever locating it. In 1954, renovations at the Belmont Hotel uncovered a sealed envelope hidden behind a loose brick in the basement storage area. The envelope, marked with Isabella's initials and dated November 30th, 1889, contained what appeared to be the missing evidence, detailed financial records correspondence between Newport families and corrupt officials, and architectural plans showing the locations of hidden compartments in over a dozen mansions. The discovery of Isabella's evidence 65 years after her death confirmed every allegation she had made. The documents revealed a conspiracy that extended far beyond Newport, involving politicians, judges, and business leaders throughout New England. But by 1954, all the original conspirators were long dead, and the statute of limitations had expired on their crimes. The Belmont Hotel donated Isabella's evidence to the Newport Historical Society, where it remains today as part of a permanent exhibition on the darker aspects of Gilded Age society. Visitors to the exhibition often report feeling an unusual chill when viewing Isabella's final photographs and reading her letters, as if her spirit remains present to ensure her story is fully told. The hotel room where Isabella spent her final nights. Room 237 was eventually converted to other uses, but staff and guests continued to report strange phenomena. The scent of French perfume, the sound of a woman weeping, and the persistent feeling of being watched by unseen eyes were all common experiences. The hotel's management eventually removed the room number and converted the space to storage. But the strange occurrences persisted. Dr. Margaret Steinberg, a historian who spent 20 years researching the Isabella Fairmont case, published the definitive account of the conspiracy in 1979. Her book, The Newport Murders: Wealth, Power, and Justice in Gilded Age America, became a bestseller and sparked renewed interest in the case. Dr. Steinberg's research confirmed that Isabella's murder was part of a broader pattern of violence used by America's elite to protect their interests. As she wrote in her conclusion, Isabella Fairmont died because she threatened to expose the truth about how America's wealthiest families accumulated their power. Her murder was not a crime of passion, but a calculated business decision carried out by men who viewed human life as just another commodity to be bought, sold, or disposed of as circumstances required. The case of Isabella Fairmont continued to captivate researchers and true crime enthusiasts well into the 21st century. In 2019, the FBI's Cold Case Unit announced that they were using modern forensic techniques to re-examine evidence from her murder. Though they acknowledged that the passage of time and the destruction of records made prosecution impossible, the reopening of the case brought renewed attention to the long-forgotten story. For many who studied the case, the question of legal justice seemed secondary to the broader lessons that Isabella's story imparted about power corruption and the price of challenging entrenched interests. Her death became a symbol of the lengths to which America's elite would go to protect their privileges and the violence they were willing to employ to silence those who threatened to expose their secrets. Her story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers that await those who dare to reveal inconvenient truths. The Isabella Fairmont case reminds us that some secrets are so dangerous that powerful people will kill to protect them, and that justice delayed is often justice denied forever. Though the wealthy families who orchestrated Isabella's murder escaped legal punishment, they were not spared the consequences of their actions. One by one, they fell victim to the very forces of corruption and greed that they had used to destroy others. Isabella's courage in standing up to America's most powerful families cost her everything, but her sacrifice ensured that their crimes would eventually be exposed. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything has been revealed, or are there still secrets buried in Newport's exclusive mansions? Isabella Fairmont's legacy is one of tragic bravery. Her death may have been buried, but her courage paved the way for the exposure of the darkness that lurked behind the gilded facades of America's elite. Leave your comment below and share your thoughts on what really happened during Isabella's final night in Newport. If you enjoyed this tale and want more stories about the dark secrets of America's elite, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who loves historical mysteries. The truth has a way of surfacing even when powerful people try to bury it forever. See you in the next video. Thank you all very much for watching my video until the end. I sincerely appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.